welcome everybody to this short Take 10 episode of Alpine Intel's The Savvy Adjuster podcast. I'm your host, Senior Account Manager Chris Nichols. I am back with Jay Dykstra. He's here to talk about something he hinted at a little bit in our previous smoke and fire damage to HVAC equipment episode, which is Puffback. So, Jay, first of all, thanks for joining us again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a great Take 10 and a very unique but specific topic that definitely people that handle this type of claim are going to want to know more about. And those of you who don't know what it is, you're going to learn something new.
Awesome. Well, I am going to start with a very broad question, and prior to this, I did a little Google search and just typed in puffback because I didn't know, and a cute photo of I guess there's a bird out there called a puffback, and I assume we're not going to be talking about that. So, just at a very high level, Jay, what is puffback?
All right. As much as I like little cute birds, you're right. We're going to try to stay focused here on the topic. Puffback is an event in a home or business where the HVAC equipment, it's kind of like it literally the name just comes, it puffs smoke back into the residence or the business, right? The problem being is it's oily smoke. And I mentioned this on our podcast version is this happens with equipment like boilers. And so again, some people will never have a boiler claim because they're not in their area, right? But it could be a furnace as well that's burning this oil, black oily stuff. And it puffs back this black oily smoke into the residence, sometimes just up through the basement, but sometimes if it's running, it's in the ductwork and it goes out throughout the entire building with this black oily smoke. And there's been some real bad ones out there. I mentioned it on the podcast is other adjusters that hear that might have cringe moments when they hear the term puffback. Those are real. I always did when I'm coming into winter. I know I'm going to have some tough, challenging claims with ice dams and different things happening with snow events. But then there was the dreaded puffback, right? Because they were such a challenging claim with so much black smoke throughout the house, and the folks that are living through that, it's one of the worst days of their life, right? And it's really tough.
So you touched a little bit about how it happens, but really how and why would a puffback occur? Is it wear and tear? Is it lack of maintenance? Is it faulty switches? Is it all of those? How would that occur, and why does it occur?
Yep. So you hit on the most of them, right? So it could be multiple things, including wear and tear and a lack of maintenance. That's probably the most common thing that happens, but it could be other things too. It could be mechanical, right? These nozzles that are in these boilers and furnaces that are shooting the oil in, there could be something wrong with that nozzle. It could be cracked or something else. Maybe somebody had worked on it recently and did something wrong on it. So could be something mechanical with the nozzle that could be an issue. You could have they have ignition switches in them, right? It's shooting oil into the combustion chamber, and then you have to ignite that oil to make it burn, right? And something's happened with that ignition switch, and it's not igniting when it's supposed to. So that's an issue. You could have a crack in the combustion chamber, right? And now you have the wrong amount of air versus fuel formula, so it doesn't burn properly either. But normally, or what's found most of the time, is people just didn't maintain the system. I mean, it's dirty. The nozzle is clogged, which is different than damage, right? It's clogged because it hasn't been maintained. The oil they're using is not clean. They're not changing their filter. The oil is supposed to go through a filter before it goes into this system and things like that. So that's probably the bigger issue is people are not maintaining their systems. They're not keeping up with all that stuff. And then the system malfunctions. And you have this puffback event where all this black smoke can get sent, oily smoke can get sent through not only the HVAC system, the boiler or the furnace, but through the entire house. If it's a boiler, they don't have ductwork, right? Because they're pumping water through pipes. But it's still going to be the basement and then maybe up from the basement into other areas. But if it's a furnace, that is the worst case scenario because it's running at the time it happens, because that's why it happens. And now this black oily smoke is pumped by the blower through the ductwork. So not only is the whole furnace inside is black, all the ductwork is black, and everything on the other end. The registers are black, and now you have to clean pretty much every surface in the home. Clean or paint every surface in the home, and probably either launder or dry clean every piece of fabric. It is a nightmare claim for sure. So
Yeah, I can see why you said that once a puffback claim hits your desk, it's a little cringeworthy. So makes total sense now. So we've covered what a puffback is, how and why a puffback may occur, but what do puffback claims look like? Not only for the adjuster, but for maybe an expert assessing the property.
right. So you're going to need to know whether this is a covered event or not for the equipment, right? Depending what policy they're handling. Again, we don't get too much into policy, but as a past adjuster, you might what they call the ensuing smoke. You might still have to deal with that. Okay, so that's a hard part of the claim. But what about the equipment itself? I mean, does the policy owe for a repair to that boiler or a new boiler, a new furnace because there's so much black oily smoke in there it can't be cleaned, and now they're making claim for this, $8,000-$10,000 furnace and all the ductwork, right? You kind of need to know what happened to it, and the kind of the reason to get help is to make a coverage decision, right? And that's where the technicians come in. Again, adjusters can't open these things up. They're not doing the testing. They're not taking nozzles out and checking them. They're not looking for cracked heat exchangers. They're not pulling out faulty ignition switches and, that sort of thing, which, by the way, if that's something that could go to subro, you might want to find out there's a liable third party. Maybe there's a recall notice on that faulty ignition switch, right? Or something. Or maybe a technician worked on this thing last week and they did something wrong. They didn't put it back together right. Something went haywire with that. You're going to want to know that as well. So yeah, what it looks like from that standpoint is having somebody being able to look at it objectively, open it up and do testing. And then so you can figure out what happened. But still, then you have to know what the extent of it is. Or is there so much smoke in there we can't clean it anymore? It's completely covered. The inside gets inside that insulation I was talking about in the furnace cabinet. Is it also a split system? So it has an evaporator coil on top of the furnace. Is that evaporator coil completely covered now in black smoke? And if you know how coils are built, you can imagine would be almost impossible to clean because of black oily smoke. You're going to be minimally replacing that. And then the ductwork. And we talked about it on the other podcast. What kind of ductwork is it? Rigid metal ductwork like we talked about, maybe we can clean it. Oily smokes can be a little bit more challenging, but you're into the flex duct or you're into the rigid fiberboard or things like that, you're going to be replacing all that ductwork. It's hard to get to. It's in those places I mentioned before, like the crawl spaces, the attics, the walls, things like that, basements. And then how much does it cost? Right? That the adjuster, you get all the other stuff right, you still have to know what it costs. Is it the proper pricing? Estimatics platforms aren't always the best when it comes to technical items, especially HVAC items and ductwork items. In my personal experience, it just doesn't have enough line items, not the right pricing, could be brand specific, could be access specific. I mean, it's a lot easier to install ductwork in the attic of a basement than it is in a crawl space or an attic. In a basement, it's easier. Attic, very difficult. It's going to cost more money to do that. Got to get all that right. All the stars have to align to figure all those things out on a puffback claim.
Well, and again, we mentioned make sure to go and check out the full episode. We do talk about repair versus replace and what to look for. A lot of valuable information on the longer episode. And again, we said it on that episode. I'll say it again. It's nice to have a trusted partner like HVACI that can go out, lend that expertise, lend that repair versus replace knowledge and pricing and all that other good stuff to get you the information you need to settle that claim accurately. So. Well, good stuff. Jay, thanks for joining us again. It's always a pleasure to have you here on the podcast.
You're welcome. And I did think of one other thing. I was trying to explain what a puffback was, and just me saying it verbally is one thing. But out on our YouTube channel, we have a video out there on how do puffbacks occur. It's like 2.5 minutes, something like that, and it's animated. It shows you some of these things, and it's a good little snippet to watch and see how that happens. and it's something you can come back to later, right? Just because you hear it now, you might not need to know this again until February. And you're like, now what was all that again? You can go back to our YouTube channel and watch that little video on how puffbacks occur. It's really could be very, very, very helpful for you. So thanks
Awesome.
for
Yeah,
having
I
me. Hope that
appreciate you.
helps, and good luck with puffbacks.
I appreciate you mentioning that. Yeah, of course, like Jay said, if you have any interest in learning more about puffbacks or other causes of loss to HVAC equipment, you can always check out our show notes. We've got some information there, or you can always head over, as Jay mentioned, to alpineintel.com or our YouTube channel to check out our resource library. Ton of information there as well. But as always, thanks to everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.